Hello, it's good to be back. It's been a minute. I just let people start coming in. But yes, I am here to read First Maccabees for you all. I greatly appreciate the support. The last few weeks have been very hectic, especially with the end of Lent and then obviously Easter or Pascha, depending on the tradition. And in that time, there's been lots of work I've been putting into the second part of the longer videos, particularly the history of the church and exactly what happened over the last 1,000 years. And it's been very enlightening, lots of research, and I'm hoping that the video will definitely do all of it justice, and I guess show you all what has happened over the last 1,000 years. But I did also want to fit in this video, which is going through First Book of Maccabees from the Orthodox Study Bible. So, without further ado, I'm going to now switch to the promo video, and then from there we're just going to get straight into it. We're going to be reading through the Deuterocanon in the Orthodox Study Bible, and this is a Bible that I would highly recommend. Not only because it has a Deuterocanon in it, which thankfully is in modern English, so it's easy to follow and to understand, but also because it provides an English translation of the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Hebrew Old Testament. It's this version of the Old Testament that is most quoted by the apostles in the New Testament, so you get access to ancient readings that just aren't present in today's Hebrew version. On top of this, there are loads of extras, including study notes, quotes from various church fathers who give their interpretation of specific passages, numerous articles going into greater depth on key theological aspects, beautiful images of icons depicting the faith, morning and evening prayers, and even a lectionary to follow along with the liturgical cycle of the church. Speaking as someone who comes from a Protestant background and who absolutely loves the scriptures, truly believing them to be the words of God, this Bible is a great Bible to have. The Orthodox Study Bible provides me with an ancient understanding and perspective of scriptures that I've known for years, and I'm always learning something new. If you'd like to get a copy for yourself, I've left a link in the description down below so you know just where to find it. Happy reading. Okay, we are back. Right, so let's get to it then. And I don't think I mentioned it before, but of course, happy Easter to everyone. Christ is risen. Truly, he has risen. So, without further ado, let's get to First Maccabees. After Alexander, whoops, don't know where to put my hands. After Alexander, the son of Philip the Macedonian, came out of the land of Kittim and conquered Macedonia and defeated Darius, the king of the Persians and the Medes, and reigned in his place. He was already king of Greece. He then fought numerous wars, conquered fortresses, and slaughtered the kings of the earth. He went to the ends of the earth and took the spoils of many nations. So the earth rested from war before him. And he was exalted. His heart was likewise encouraged. He formed a mighty army and ruled countries, nations, and princes, and they all paid taxes to him. Then later he fell sick, and he knew he was dying. So he brought in his trusted servants, who had grown up with him from childhood, and parceled out his kingdom to them while he was still living. After Alexander reigned for 12 years, death claimed him. Then his servants began to rule, each in his appointed place. They all put on crowns after he died, and their sons for many years after them, and the evils they caused multiplied on the earth. So that's obviously talking about Alexander the Great. A sinful root came forth from them. Antiochus Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus the king, who was a hostage in Rome. He began his reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days, lawless men came forth from the sons of Israel, and they persuaded many, saying, "Let us make a covenant with the Gentiles surrounding us, for ever since we were separated from them, many evils have found us." This proposal found favor in their eyes, and some of the people eagerly desired to enter into this agreement. So they went to the king, and he gave them authority to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. Then they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem, according to the customs of the Gentiles, and made themselves as the uncircumcision. So they fell away from the holy covenant, yoked themselves to the Gentiles, and sold themselves to do evil. Thus the kingdom was prepared before Antiochus, and he determined he would reign over the land of Egypt, so as to rule over two kingdoms. Thus he entered Egypt with a strong multitude of chariots, elephants, cavalrymen, and a large army. He engaged Ptolemy, king of Egypt, in battle, and Ptolemy turned from him in shame and fled. Many were wounded and fell. So they captured mighty cities in Egypt, and Antiochus took spoils in the land of Egypt. After he conquered Egypt in the 143rd year, Antiochus turned and went up to Israel and Jerusalem with a large army. He entered the sanctuary in arrogance, and took the golden altar, the lampstand, all the utensils, the table of presentation, the cups and bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the golden ornaments on the face of the temple. He stripped everything, and took the silver and the gold, and everything costly, and the hidden treasures he found. Taking all these things, he departed for his own land. He committed deeds of murder, and spoke with great arrogance. There was great mourning everywhere in Israel. Rulers and elders groaned. Virgins and young men grew weak, and the beauty of the women was altered. Every bridegroom took up a lament, and sat mourning in his bridal chamber. The land was shaken for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. After 2 years, the king sent a revenue official to the cities of Judah, and he entered Jerusalem with a large army. Antiochus spoke peaceable words to them with deceit, and they believed him. Then he fell upon the city suddenly, struck it a great blow, and killed many people from Israel. He took spoils from the city, set it on fire, and tore down its houses and the city walls. They took captive the women and the children, and took possession of the animals. Then they built the city of David with a great and strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They placed there a sinful nation of lawless men, and they became strong within it. And they laid up weapons and provisions, and gathered together the spoils they had taken from Jerusalem. Then they returned there and were like a great snare. It became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil accuser against Israel continually. They shed innocent blood around the sanctuary and defiled the sanctuary. The inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them, and she became a dwelling place of strangers. She became a stranger to her offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a desert, and her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into a disgrace, and her honor into contempt. Her dishonor prevailed against her glory, and her high position was turned into mourning. Then the king wrote to all his kingdom that they all were to be as one people, and that each one was to forsake his customs. So all the nations accepted the word of the king. Many from Israel also thought it good to serve him, so they sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. Then the king sent books to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah by the hand of messengers, and told them to follow foreign customs in the land, to forbid whole burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbaths and the feasts, and to defile the sanctuary and the holy ones. These books also told them to build altars, sacred precincts, and temples to idols, to sacrifice swine and common animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised, so they would corrupt their souls by every unclean and profane thing, and forget the law and alter all the ordinances. They also added that whoever did not obey the word of the king would die. According to all these words, he wrote to everyone in his kingdom. He also placed inspectors over all the people and commanded the cities of Judah to sacrifice in each and every city. Thus, many of the people, everyone who forsook the law, joined together and did evil in the land. They forced Israel to hide in every place of refuge they had. Then on the 15th day of Chislev, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation on the altar of the whole burnt offerings, and built altars in the surrounding cities of Judah. Interesting terms. You see where Jesus got that from? They also burned incense at the doors of houses and in the streets. And when they found books of the law, they tore them to pieces and burned them in the fire. Whenever a book of the covenant was found in someone's possession, or if anyone sympathized with the law, the judgment of the king was to kill them. They acted with their might against Israel, against those who were found month after month in the cities. Then on the 25th day of the month, they sacrificed on the altar, which was on top of the altar of the whole burnt offerings. In keeping with the decree, they sentenced to death the women who had their children circumcised, and the families who had circumcised them, and hung the infants from their mothers' necks. Wow. Yet many in Israel grew strong, and determined in themselves not to eat unclean things. They chose rather to die than be defiled by foods or profane the holy covenant. So they died, and great wrath came upon Israel. Wow, that's a lot. In those days of Mattathias, the son of John of the tribe of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jorib, rose up from Jerusalem and settled in Modean. He had 5 sons: John, called Gadi, Simon, called Thassi, Judas, called Maccabees, Eleazar, called Avaran, and Jonathan, called Aphos. He saw the blasphemies taking place in Judah and Jerusalem, and said, "Alas, why was I born to see this, the ruin of my people, the destruction of the holy city, and to live there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, the sanctuary into the hand of foreigners? Her temple has become like a man without honor. Her glorious vessels were carried away into captivity. Her infants have been slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation has not inherited her palaces and taken hold of her spoils? All her adornment has been removed. In place of freedom, she has become a slave. And behold, our sanctuary, our beauty and our glory have been laid waste, and the Gentiles have desecrated it. Why should we live any longer? Then Mattathias and his sons tore their clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned exceedingly. Now those from the king who were enforcing the apostasy journeyed to the city of Median to make them offer sacrifice, and many from Israel also came with them. So Mattathias and his sons, I'm never going to get this name right. Mattathias, I'm going to go with that. So Mattathias and his sons gathered together. Then those from the king spoke to Mattathias, saying, "You are a great and glorious leader in this city, and supported by your sons and brothers. Now, come be the first to follow the decree of the king, as all the Gentiles and the men of Judah have done. And those who remain in Jerusalem, and you and your sons, will be among the king's friends, and you and your friends will be honored with silver and gold and many rewards." Then Mattathias answered, speaking with a loud voice, "Though all the Gentiles in the house of the kingdom of the king obey him, and each turns from the worship of their fathers and chooses to follow his commands, my sons and my brothers and I will continue in the covenant of our fathers. Far be it from us to forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not obey the words of the king to turn aside from our worship to the right or to the left." When he finished saying these words, a Jew came forward in the sight of everyone to sacrifice upon the altar in Median, in accordance with the king's decree. When Mattathias saw him, he was filled with zeal, and his heart trembled, and poured forth anger and judgment. Then he ran and slew him upon the altar. So he killed the king's man who wanted to offer sacrifice at that time, and he tore down the altar. Thus he had zeal for the law, just as Phinehas had against Zambri the son of Salome. I wonder if that's the Phinehas of, I think it's Numbers, where he kills, who was it? He kills a Jew alongside the Midianite, because they were committing idolatry, sexual immorality with the Midianite women. But yeah, that's a very interesting link that's been made. Then Mattathias cried out with a loud voice in the city, saying, "Everyone who has zeal for the law and holds to the covenant, let him follow me." So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left behind whatever they had in the city. Then many who sought righteousness and judgment went down to the desert to live there. They, their sons, their women, and their cattle, because evils increased severely against them. It was also announced to the king's men and the soldiers in Jerusalem, the city of David, that certain men who had scattered when the command of the king was made known had gone into hiding in the desert. Thus many ran after them, tracked them down, marched against them, and engaged them in battle on the Sabbath day. Then they said to them, "Now come out and do the will of the king, and you shall live." But they answered, "We will not come out, nor will we do the will of the king to desecrate the Sabbath day." So the enemy rushed into battle against them. Yet they did not answer them, nor did they cast a stone, nor did they block up their hiding places, saying, "Let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth will justify us, that you destroyed us unjustly." So the king's men rose against them in battle on the Sabbath, and they died along with their women, children, and cattle, as many as 1,000 people. Then Mattathias and his friends grieved for them exceedingly. So each one said to his neighbor, "If we do as our brothers did, and fail to fight against the Gentiles for our life and our ordinances, they will quickly wipe us off the earth." So they resolved on that day, saying, "Every man who comes against us for battle on the Sabbath day, let us war against him, and we shall not all die as our brothers did in their hiding places." Then the synagogue of the Hasidians gathered with them, a mighty army from Israel, everyone who willingly offered himself for the law. Everyone who escaped from evils was added to them and became their support. So they forced an army and struck the sinners in their wrath and the lawless men in their anger. The rest fled to the Gentiles to be rescued. Mattathias and his allies also surrounded the altars and tore them down, and they circumcised the uncircumcised boys by force, as many as they found in the mountains of Israel. Thus they pursued the sons of arrogance, and the undertaking prospered in their hand. They took the law out of the hand of the Gentiles and the kings, and did not allow the sinners to dominate them. Then the days approached for Mattathias to die, and he spoke to his sons, saying, "Now arrogance and scorn and the time of destruction and furious anger have been strengthened. Therefore, children, be zealous for the law, and offer your lives for the covenant of our fathers, and remember the deeds our fathers did in their generations, and receive great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful in trial, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness? And Joseph, at the time of his trouble, kept the commandment and became ruler of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, showed true zeal and received a covenant of eternal priesthood. Joshua fulfilled the word and became a judge in Israel. Caleb testified in the assembly and received an inheritance in the land. David, in the mercy shown him, inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. In his great zeal for the law, Elijah was taken up into heaven. Ananias, Azarias, and Mishael believed and were saved from the fiery furnace. In his innocence, Daniel was delivered from the mouth of lions. Thus, understand from generation to generation that all who hope in the Lord will not be weak. Do not fear the words of a sinful man, because his glory is like manure and worms. Today he will be exalted, but tomorrow he will not be found, for he returned to his dust, and his purpose will perish. Children, be courageous and strong in the law, because you will be honored by it. So behold, Simeon, your brother. I know he is a man of wisdom. Listen to him every day, and he shall be your father. Judas Maccabeus, mighty in fighting from his youth, he shall be the leader of your army, and he will fight the fight of the people. And you bring forth with you all those who are doers of the law, and seek justice for your people. Repay the Gentiles in full, and hold fast to the ordinance of the law." Then he blessed them and was added to his fathers. So he died in the 146th year, and was buried in the tomb of his fathers in Median, and all of Israel mourned him with great mourning. So on chapter 3, I'll just take a quick drink. All right, chapter 3. Then Judas, his son, who was called Maccabeus, rose up in his place. His brothers all helped him, and everyone who had been allied with his father, and they fought the battle for Israel with gladness. He enlarged his people's glory, and was clothed with a breastplate like a giant, and he girded on his weapons and waged war, sheltering the camp with his sword. He was like a lion in his deeds, like a young lion roaring for its prey. For he pursued the lawless and searched them out, and he set on fire those who troubled his people. The lawless were humbled from fear of him, and all the workers of lawlessness were troubled. For deliverance prospered by his hand. He embittered many rulers, and brought joy to Jacob by his deeds, and may his memory be blessed forever. He passed through the cities of Judah, and destroyed the ungodly from the land, and he turned wrath away from Israel. His name was known to the ends of the earth, and he gathered those who were perishing. Then Apollonius gathered the Gentiles together and brought a great army from Samaria to wage war with Israel. But Judas knew it and went out to meet him. He struck and killed him, and many wounded fell, and the rest fled. They took their spoils, and Judas took the sword of Apollonius and fought with it every day. Now Siron, the leader of the army of Syria, heard Judas had gathered a large assembly of faithful men with him, and they were going out into battle. So he said, I will make a name for myself and be honored in the kingdom. I will fight Judas and his followers, who despise the word of the king. He set forth, and with him went an army of godless men, strong enough to help him take vengeance on the sons of Israel. So he drew near to the highlands of Beth-horon, and Judas went out to meet him with only a few allies. As they saw the army coming to meet them, they said to Judas, How will we, being few, be able to fight against such a powerful number? We who have come out today are weak from lack of food. Then Judas said, It is easy to hem in many at the hands of a few, and it makes no difference before heaven to save with many or with few. For victory in battle does not come from the size of the army, but from the might of heaven. These come against us in the abundance of insolence and lawlessness, to seize us and our women and children, and to take spoils from us. But we are fighting for our lives and our laws. God himself will crush them from before our face, and as for you, do not fear because of them. When he was through speaking, Judas suddenly rushed against them, and Siron and his army were destroyed before him. He pursued him into the descent of Beth-horon as far as the plain. Around 800 of their soldiers perished. The remainder fled into the land of the Philistines. Then fear of Judas and his brothers began, and terror fell upon the nations around them. So his fame reached the king, and the Gentiles talked about the battles of Judas. When Antiochus the king heard these words, he was very angry, and he sent and gathered all the forces of his kingdom, an exceedingly strong army. He also opened his treasury, and gave a year's wages to the troops, and commanded them to be ready for any need. Then he noticed the silver in the treasury was depleted, and the taxes from the region were small, because of the dissension and misfortune he caused in the land when he took away the laws that existed from the earliest days. So he took care not to pay out expenditures and give gifts as abundantly as he had done before, even more lavishly than the previous kings. He was very disturbed in himself, so he decided to go to Persia and collect taxes from those regions and gather abundant silver. He left Lysias, a man of distinction from the royal lineage, in charge of all the king's affairs, from the river Euphrates to the boundary of Egypt. He was also to take care of his son Antiochus until his return. Then he handed over to Lysias half of the armies and the elephants. He gave him orders concerning all his wishes and concerning those who lived in Judea and Jerusalem. He ordered him to send an army against them, to destroy them and remove the might of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem, and to remove their memory from that place. He was also to settle foreigners in all their regions and distribute their land by lot. Then the king took half of the remaining armies and left Antioch, the capital of his kingdom. In the 147th year, he crossed over the Euphrates River and entered the regions on the other side. Lysias appointed Ptolemy, the son of Dorymenes, and Nicanor and Gorgias, valiant men who were loyal to the king. And he sent with them 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry to go into the region of Judah and crush it according to the king's orders. So he set out with the whole army, and they went and camped near Emmaus on the plain. When the merchants of the region heard about them, they took a very large amount of silver and gold and shackles, and went into the camp to obtain the sons of Israel as slaves. The army of Syria and of the land of the Philistines joined them as well. Now Judas and his brothers saw that evil events were increasing, and the armies were encamped at their borders. They learned also the words of the king, which he ordered to bring destruction and annihilation on the people. So each man said to his neighbor, "Let us repair the ruin of our people, and battle for our people and the sanctuary." Then the assembly gathered to prepare for battle, and to pray and ask God for mercy and compassion. Jerusalem was uninhabited like a desert. No one brought products in or took them out, and the sanctuary had been trampled down. The sons of foreigners were in the citadel, a lodging place for the Gentiles. Gladness was taken from Jacob, and flute and harp played no more. They assembled and went into Mizpah opposite Jerusalem, because at a former time Mizpah was a place for prayer in Israel. They fasted on that day and put on sackcloth, sprinkled ashes upon their head, and tore their garments. They opened the book of the law to look into those matters about which the Gentiles consulted, and likenesses of their idols. They also carried the priestly garments and the firstfruits and the tithe, and they stirred up the Nazarites who had finished their days. Then they cried aloud to heaven, saying, "What do we do with these, and where will we take them? Your sanctuary has been trampled down and defiled, and your priests are in mourning and humiliated. Behold, the Gentiles have gathered against us to destroy us. You know what they plan against us. How will we be able to stand against them if you will not help us?" Then they blew the trumpets and cried out with a loud shout. After this, Judas appointed rulers for the people, leaders for thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. He ordered those who were building houses, or were betrothed to women, or were growing vineyards, or were afraid, to return each one to his own home according to the law. Then the army departed and set up camp south of Emmaus. Judas said to them, "Be ready at dawn to fight with these Gentiles, who have gathered against us to destroy us and our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in war than to look upon the evils that the Gentiles would bring to us and the sanctuary. But as God's will is in heaven, so he will do." Then Gorgias took 5,000 men and 1,000 choice cavalry, and the army marched out by night to descend upon the camp of the Judeans and strike them suddenly. Young men from the citadel served as his guides, but Judas got word of it, and he and his soldiers marched out to strike the king's army in Emmaus, while his forces were dispersed from the camp. When Gorgias came into the camp of Judas at night, he found no one. So he sought them in the mountains, saying, "These are fleeing from us." At first light, Judas was seen on the plain with 3,000 men, but they did not have armor and swords as they wished. They saw the Gentiles' camp with strong fortification, and surrounded by cavalry trained for battle. But Judah said to his men, "Do not be afraid of their numbers or of their attack. Remember how our fathers were saved in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with his army. So now, let us cry out to heaven and see if the Lord will be with us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and crush these forces before us this day. Then all the nations will know that he is the Redeemer and Savior of Israel." So the Gentiles lifted their eyes and saw them coming opposite them, and they departed from their camp and went into battle. Then those with Judas sounded the trumpets. Thus they met, and the foreigners were crushed, fleeing into the plain. All those remaining fell by the sword. They pursued them as far as Gazara, and as far as the plain of Idumea, and Azotus, and Jamnia, and about 3,000 of their men fell. Then Judas and his army returned from pursuing them, and he said to the people, "Do not desire the spoils for the battle." Then Judas and his army returned from pursuing them, and he said to the people, "Do not desire the spoils, for the battle is before us. Gorgias and his army are in the mountain nearby, but stand firm before our enemies and battle them, and afterwards take the spoils boldly." While Judas was finishing these words, an enemy detachment was seen peeping out from the mountains, and they saw that their army had been put to flight, and that the Judeans had set their camp on fire, for the smoke that was seen revealed what had happened. When they became aware of this, they were very afraid. And when they observed the forces of Judas prepared for battle in the plain, they fled to the region of the Philistines. Judas returned to take spoils from their camp, and they took massive amounts of gold and silver and cloth dyed blue and purple, and abundant wealth. As they returned from battle, they sang hymns and blessed heaven, because the Lord is good, and his mercy endures forever. Thus great deliverance happened to Israel on that day. But all the Gentiles who escaped went and reported to Lysias everything that had happened. When he heard this, he was bewildered and disheartened, because things had not happened to Israel as he wished, and had not turned out as the king commanded him. The following year, Lysias recruited 60,000 chosen men and 50,000 cavalry, so he could fight them. Then he came to Idumea and camped in Beth-dor, and Judas met them there with 10,000 soldiers. When he saw their mighty camp, he prayed and said, "Blessed are you, O Saviour of Israel, who stopped the attack of the giant warrior by the hand of your servant David, and delivered the Philistines' camp into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, his armor-bearer. Even so, besiege this camp by the hand of your people Israel, and let these enemies be ashamed of their army and cavalry. Put cowardice in them, and melt the boldness of their might, and let them be shaken by their defeat. Cast them down from the sword of those who love you, and let all men who know your name give praise to you with hymns." Then they attacked one another, and 5,000 men from the camp of Lysias fell, and some fell from the opposite side. When Lysias saw the turn of events for his troops, and the courage shown by those of Judas, and how they were prepared either to live or to die bravely, he returned to Antioch and recruited mercenaries to again invade Judea with an even greater force. So Judas and his brothers with him said, "Behold, our foes have been crushed. Let us go to purify the sanctuary and renew it." Thus the entire camp gathered and ascended to Mount Zion. They saw there the sanctuary deserted, the altar desecrated, and the doors burned down. In the courtyard, they found that bushes had grown up as in the wooded area or on one of the mountains. They also saw the priests' quarters in ruins. So they tore their garments and lamented greatly and sprinkled themselves with ashes. They fell on their faces on the earth, sounded the signal on the trumpets, and cried to heaven. Then Judas ordered his men to fight those in the citadel until he purified the sanctuary. He chose righteous priests devoted to the law. They purified the sanctuary and carried the defiled stones to an unclean place. And they discussed what they should do with the altar of whole burnt offerings, which had been desecrated. It seemed to them the best plan was to tear it down, so it would not be a reproach to them because the Gentiles had corrupted it. So they tore down the altar. They also stacked the stones in an appropriate location on the temple hill until a prophet would come and tell what should be done with them. Then they took uncut stones according to the law and consecrated a new altar like the one before. They also repaired the sanctuary and the inside of the temple and consecrated the courtyards. They made new holy vessels and carried the lampstand, the altar of incense, and the table into the temple. And they burnt incense on the altar and lit the lights on the lampstands, and these gave light inside the temple. Then they set bread on the temple, hung the curtains, and completed all the tasks they had begun. They rose early on the morning of the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month of Chislev, in the 148th year, and offered sacrifice according to the law on the new altar of whole burnt offerings which they made. It was consecrated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals at the time, and on the day the Gentiles had desecrated it. All the people fell down and worshipped and blessed heaven, which had prospered them. They celebrated the consecration of the altar for 8 days. They offered whole burnt offerings with gladness, and the sacrifice of a peace offering and a thank offering. They also adorned the face of the temple with crowns of gold and small shields, and restored the gates and the priest quarters, and installed doors. There was great gladness among the people, and the disgrace of the Gentiles was removed. Then Judas and his brothers and the congregation of Israel decided that each year at that time, the days of the consecration of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 full days, beginning on the 25th of the month of Chislev. At this same time, they also built high walls and strong towers around Mount Zion, lest the Gentiles come and destroy these things, as they had done before. Then he stationed an army there to guard it. And he fortified the town of Bethzor, so the people would have a fortress that faced Idumea. Grab another drink. Right. Chapter 5. When the surrounding nations heard the altar was repaired and the sanctuary renewed as before, they were extremely angry. So they resolved to kill the race of Jacob who lived among them, and they began to kill and destroy the people. Thus Judas waged war on the sons of Esau in Idumea at Akrabatani, for they were besieging Israel. He struck them a great blow, humbled them, and took spoils from them. He also recalled the evil acts by the sons of Bayan, who trapped and snared the people in ambush out on the roads. He shut them up in their towers and encamped around them, vowing to destroy them. So he set their towers on fire with everyone inside. Then he crossed over against the sons of Ammon and found a strong army and many people, with Timothy as their leader. He fought many battles against them until he struck them down, and they were crushed before him. Then he overpowered Jazer and its villages, and came back to Judea. Now the foreigners in Gilead assembled against the Israelites, living within their borders, to destroy them. But they fled into the fortress of Dathema, and sent letters to Judas and his brothers, saying, "The Gentiles have gathered against us, and surrounded us to destroy us. They have made ready to come here and overpower the fortress, where we have taken refuge, and Timothy is in charge of their army. Now therefore, come and deliver us from their hand, for many of our men have perished. All our brothers in the region of Tob have been put to death, and they took their wives and children captive, along with their possessions, and they destroyed about 1,000 men there." While their letters were being read, behold, other envoys arrived from Galilee with torn garments, and reported similar words, saying that those from Ptolemais, Tyre, Sidon, and all Galilee of the Gentiles had assembled themselves together to destroy us. So when Judas and the people heard these words, a great assembly was gathered to decide what to do for their brothers, who were in trouble and were being attacked by the adversaries. So Judas said to Simon his brother, "Choose men for yourself, and go and save your brothers in Galilee, while my brother Jonathan and I go to Gilead." He left Joseph, the son of Zechariah, and Azariah, a leader of the people, with the rest of the army in Judea, to guard it. He ordered them, saying, "Take charge of this people, but do not go into battle against the Gentiles until we return." Then 3,000 troops were chosen for Simon to go to Galilee, and 8,000 men for Judas to take to Gilead. Thus Simon went into Galilee and fought many battles with the Gentiles, and crushed the Gentiles before him. He chased them to the gates of Ptolemais, and 3,000 Gentiles perished, and he took their spoils. So he took the Israelites of Galilee and Arabata, along with their wives and children and everything they possessed, and brought them with great joy to Judea. Meanwhile, Judas Maccabeus and Jonathan his brother crossed over the Jordan and journeyed 3 full days into the desert. They came upon the Nabateans, who met them peacefully and told them everything that had happened to their brothers in Gilead. Many have been imprisoned in Bozrah and Bosor in Alima, Chaspho, Maked, and Karnaim. All these cities were fortified and strong, and some have been imprisoned in the remaining cities of Gilead. Tomorrow your foes will attack the strongholds to destroy and capture all of them in one day. Judas and his forces returned at once to Bozrah by the desert road, and he captured the city, killed all the males by the edge of the sword, took all the spoils, and set the city on fire. He marched from there by night, and they kept going until they reached the fortress of Dathema. Then at daybreak they looked up and beheld many people, too many to count, carrying ladders and engines of war to take the fortress and strike the Israelites inside. When Judas saw the battle had started, an outcry went up from the city to heaven with trumpets and loud shouts. So he said to his army of men, "Fight today for the sake of our brothers." Then he came up behind them in 3 companies, and they sounded the trumpets and cried aloud in prayer. When Timothy's army saw that they faced Maccabeus, they fled before him. He struck them a great blow, and on that day 8,000 of them perished. Judas then made his way to Alima. He waged war and captured it, taking its spoils and setting the city on fire. He marched on from there and captured Chaspho, Maked, and Bosor, and the remaining cities of Gilead. Timothy, however, called together more troops, and set up camp opposite Raphon across the stream. Judas dispatched soldiers to scout the camp, and they returned to him, saying, "All the foreigners have gathered around us, and a very large army is with him. Further, they have hired Arab mercenaries to help, and they are also camped on the other side of the stream, prepared to come against you in battle." So Judas went out to face them. Timothy told the officers of his army, while Judas and his camp drew near the stream, "If he crosses the stream against us first, we will be unable to withstand him, for he is strong enough to defeat us. But if he is frightened and sets up camp across the stream, we will pass over against him and crush him." But as Judas approached the water, he stationed the scribes of the troops near the stream and ordered them, "Do not allow anyone to stay in camp, but make all of them join the battle." So Judas crossed over to meet them first, with all the men behind him. Then all the Gentiles were crushed by them. They dropped their weapons and fled into the sacred regions of Canaan. So Judas captured the city and set the sacred precinct on fire, along with all those residing there. Thus Canaan was defeated, for they were not able to stand against Judas. After this, Judas assembled all the Jews living in Gilead, from small to great, along with their wives and children and their possessions, a great entourage, to return to the land of Judah. They came as far as Ephron, an expensive and fortified city on the highway. They could not pass through either to the right or to the left. The only way to go was through the middle of town. But the men of the city closed it off and barricaded the gates with stones. So Judas sent them a peaceful word, saying, "Let us pass through your land to go to our land. No one will harm you. Merely we will come through on foot." But they refused to open to him. So Judas gave orders to proclaim to the troops that each man make camp where he was. Then the soldiers in the army made camp, and he fought the men of Ephron all day and all night, and the city was given over into his hand. He killed every male with the edge of the sword, destroyed the city completely, and took its spoils. So he passed through the city, stepping over those who were killed. Then they came to the Jordan, crossing over into the great plain facing Beth Shan, and Judas gathered the stragglers and encouraged the men along the way until they entered Judah. They marched up to Mount Zion and sacrificed whole burnt offerings and offered whole burnt offerings with joy and gladness of heart, because not one of them was lost before they returned home in peace. While Judas and Jonathan had been in Gilead, and Simon his brother was in Galilee facing Ptolemais, Joseph the son of Zacharias and Azariah, officers of the army, got word of their courageous acts and the victorious battles they fought. They spoke, saying, Let us make a name for ourselves as well, and take on the Gentiles who live around us." Thus they gave a command to those from the army with them, and they marched to Jamnia. But Gorgias and his army went out from the city to face them in battle, and Joseph and Azariah were routed and chased as far as the boundaries of Judea. That day about 2,000 men of Israel perished. It was a great defeat for the people, for expecting to act heroically, they did not follow the orders of Judas and his brothers, and they did not belong to the seed of those men through whom Israel received the gift of deliverance. So Judas and his brothers were honored greatly throughout all Israel, and even by the Gentiles, where their name was being heard. People assembled around them and gave them praise. Then Judas went out with his brothers and fought the sons of Esau in the land to the south, and attacked Hebron and its towns, and pulled down its many fortresses, and set on fire its towers round about. He also marched into the country of the Philistines, and then on to Marisa. Some priests that day who wanted to show their courage perished in battle, for they went out to fight recklessly. But Judas turned aside to Azotus, the country of the Philistines. He destroyed their altars, set the carved idols of their gods on fire, and took spoils in the cities. Then he came back to the land of Judah. Christ is risen. Truly he is risen indeed. Right. Chapter 6. Now King Antiochus passed through the upper countries and heard that Elymas in Persia was a splendid city for its wealth in silver and gold. Its temple contained great wealth, with shields of gold, breastplates, and weaponry left there by Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian king who first ruled over the Greeks. So he came and sought to defeat the city and take spoils, but he failed because his plot was uncovered by the men of the city. They confronted and fought against him, and he fled and retreated from there very discouraged, and went back to Babylon. Then a man came and told him, while he was still in Persia, that his army, which had invaded the land of Judah, was put to flight. Then Lysias had gone first with a strong army, but had been put to shame before Israel, that Israel was growing strong by the weapons, supplies, and the abundant spoils they had taken from the armies they had conquered. Moreover, they had pulled down the abomination he built on top of the altar in Jerusalem, and they had encircled the sanctuary with high walls as it had before, as well as Beth-Thor, his hometown. When the king received this report, he was shocked and greatly shaken. He fell upon his bed and was sick with grief, because matters had not gone for him as he had hoped. King Antiochus lay there several days, for deepening grief worsened his condition. He concluded he was about to die. Thus he called together his friends, saying, "Sleep has eluded my eyes, and anxiety has devastated my heart. I ask myself, what is this stress I have come to, and into what sea of troubles am I immersed? For I was kind and loved as a ruler. But now I recall the evils I did in Jerusalem, for I took all the silver and gold vessels and sent to destroy those who lived in Judah for no good reason. I know that because of these things evils have found me, and behold, I am perishing with deep grief in a foreign land." He then summoned Philip, one of his friends, and set him over the entire kingdom. He gave him his crown and his robe and ring, that he could take charge of his son Antiochus and raise him to rule. Thus Antiochus the king died in the 149th year. When Lysias found out that the king had reposed, he established Antiochus his son to reign. Lysias had raised him from youth and called him Eupator. Now men from the citadel were confining Israel to the area around the sanctuary. They were attempting by whatever means to injure them and to bring strength to the Gentiles. So he gathered all the men to defeat them. They assembled the army and attacked the city in the 150th year. He also built engines of war and other instruments of battle. But some of these enemies escaped from the enclosure, and some ungodly Israelites sided with them. They approached the king, saying, "How long will it be until you render a judgment to avenge our brothers? We were pleased to serve your father and to follow what he said and obey his orders. Because of this, the sons of our people attacked the citadel and became our enemies. Besides this, they killed as many of us as they found, and our inheritances were taken away. But they have not stretched out their hand against us alone, but also against all the lands on their borders. And behold, today they have surrounded the citadel in Jerusalem to defeat it. They have strengthened the sanctuary and Beth-Zur as well. So unless you quickly overtake them, they will do worse things than these, and you will be unable to stop them." The king was angered greatly when he heard this. So he assembled all his friends, the military leaders, and those who ruled. Armies of mercenaries came to him as well from other nations and from various islands of the seas. So the number of his armies was 100,000 foot soldiers, 20,000 cavalry, and 32 elephants trained for battle. They arrived through Idumea and marched against Beth-Zur, fighting for many days and building engines of war. But Israel went out and set them on fire and battled heroically. Judas then marched out from the citadel and set up camp at Beth-Zechariah, across from the king's camp. The next morning, the king rose at dawn and led his army on a forced march on the highway to Beth-Zechariah. His soldiers prepared themselves for warfare and blew the trumpets. They also showed the elephants the juice of grapes and mulberries to ready them for the campaign. Then they stationed the elephants among the phalanxes and set alongside each animal 1,000 men, covered with coats of mail and with bronze helmets on their heads. 500 horsemen were chosen and assigned to each elephant. These positioned themselves beforehand wherever the animal was, and wherever it went, they rode alongside and never left it alone. Sturdy covered wooden towers were strapped upon each elephant by a special harness, and 4 armed men fought from inside each tower with its Indian driver. They positioned the remainder of the horsemen on each side. On the 2 flanks of the forces, disturbing the enemy while they themselves were protected by the phalanxes. As the sun shined on the golden and bronze shields, the hills glistened from them and lit up like a flaming fire. While one sector of the king's forces was stretched out on the high hills, and some were on the plain, they marched on steadfastly in good order. Everyone trembled when they heard the sounds of the soldiers as they marched along, and the clanging of their weapons, for the army was massive and very strong. But Judas drew near with his army in battle formation, and 600 of the king's men fell. Then Eleazar, called Avran, saw one of the elephants covered with royal armor. It was taller than the rest, and he reasoned the king was riding it. So he laid down his life to rescue his people and to make an everlasting name for himself. He ran boldly into the center of the phalanx, killing soldiers to the right and left, and they got out of his way on both flanks. Then he crawled under the elephant, struck it from beneath, and killed it. It fell to the ground on top of him, and he died there. When the Israelites saw the royal might and the fierce attack of the troops, they turned away from them in flight. But the soldiers of the king's army went up to Jerusalem to attack them, and the king set up camp in Judea on and on Mount Zion. He reached a peace accord with the men of Beth Zor, who evacuated the city because they had no food there to withstand a siege. For it was a sabbatical year for the land. So the king captured Beth Zor and set a guard there to secure it. He then set a camp opposite the sanctuary for several days and built siege towers, engines of war which threw fire and stones, machines to fire off arrows and catapults. The defenders also made engines of war to match theirs, so they battled several days. But with no food stored up, because it was the 7th year, and the men who survived in Judea against the Gentiles had eaten the remaining provisions, few men remained in the sanctuary, for hunger had overtaken them. They scattered each to his own place. Now Lysias got word that Philip, whom Antiochus the king had chosen while still alive to raise Antiochus his son to rule, had returned from Persia and Media with the armies that he had gone there with the king, and that he was trying to regain control of the kingdom. So Lysias decided immediately to send a message to the king, the commanders, and the men, saying, "We grow weaker each day. Our food supply is running out. The force we are fighting against is strong, and governing the kingdom puts pressure on us. Therefore, let us come to agreement with these men and have peace with them and their nation. We should arrange for them to live by their laws as before, for it was because of their laws, which we abolished, that they became furious and did all the things they have done." This word pleased the king and the commanders. So he sent an offer of peace to the Israelites, which they accepted. Thus the king and the commanders gave them their oath. On these conditions, the Israelites evacuated the fortress. But when the king came to Mount Zion and saw the fortification of the place, he broke his promise and commanded his men to pull down the surrounding wall. Then he left hastily and came back to Antioch. There he discovered Philip in charge, so he attacked him and captured the city by force. Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, set forth from Rome in the 151st year, sailed with a few men into the city by the sea, and reigned there. As he entered the royal house of his fathers, his army seized Antiochus and Lysias and brought them to him. When he became aware of this action, he said, "Do not show me their faces." So the soldiers put them to death, and Demetrius occupied the throne of his kingdom. Then all the lawless and ungodly men of Israel came to him. Alcimus, who wanted to be a priest, led them. They brought charges against the people before the king, saying, "Judas and his brothers have destroyed all your friends and scattered us from our land. Therefore, send a man you trust, and let him see all the destruction he did to us and to the country of the king. Then let him bring punishment to them and all who serve them." The king then appointed Maccabees, one of his friends, who ruled the province of beyond the river, for he was prominent in the kingdom and loyal to the king. Then he sent him and the ungodly Alcimus, whom he appointed to the priesthood, and ordered him to avenge the sons of Israel. They marched on with a large army and came into the land of Judah, and sent envoys to Judas and his brothers with peaceful words full of deceit. But they did not heed their words, for they noticed they came with a large army. Then a delegation of scribes was sent to meet with Alcimus and Maccabees to request justice. The Hasidians were the first among the sons of Israel to seek peace with them. For they said, a priest from the seed of Aaron, came with their forces, and he will not do us wrong. The priest spoke peacefully to them and prophesied. The priest spoke peacefully to them and promised them, saying, "We will not speak to injure you or your friends." They believed him, but he overtook 60 of their men and put them to death in one day, according to the word which was written. They poured out the flesh of your saints and their blood around Jerusalem, but there was no one to bury them. Then fear and trembling fell upon all the people, for they said, "There is no truth and uprightness in them, for they violated the promise and oath they swore." So Maccabees departed from Jerusalem and marched to SAAS. He sent for and captured many of the soldiers who deserted him, and some of the people, and he slaughtered them at the great well. He put alchemists in charge of the region, and left an army with him to serve him. Then Maccabees returned to the king. Alchemists then strove for the high priesthood, and all who harassed their people also gathered with him. They took control of the country of Judah and damaged Israel greatly. Now Judah saw all the evil alchemists and those with him had done among the sons of Israel. It was worse than what the Gentiles did. Thus Judas departed to all the region surrounding Judea and took vengeance on the men who had deserted. He forbade those in the city to journey out to the countryside. But when alchemists realized Judas and his followers were growing strong and knew that he could not prevail against them, he went back and brought evil charges against them before the king. The king then sent Nicanor, one of his renowned commanders, who hated and disdained Israel, and ordered him to get rid of the people. Nicanor came up to Jerusalem with a large army, and he sent Judas and his brothers peaceful words full of deceit, saying, "Let these be no quarrel between us. Let there be no quarrel between us. I will come peacefully with a few men to see you in person." So he approached Judas, and they greeted each other peacefully. But the adversaries prepared to seize Judas. Then Judas was aware that Nicanor had come with deceit, and he feared him, for he did not care to meet him again. When Nicanor learned his plot had been discovered, he went into battle with Judas at Kafar Salama. Some 500 of Nicanor's soldiers fell. The remainder fled to the city of David. After this, Nicanor went up to Mount Zion. Then some priests came out of the sanctuary, along with some elders of the people, to greet him in peace, showing him the whole burnt offering which they had sacrificed on behalf of the king. However, he mocked and ridiculed them. He defiled them and spoke with arrogance to them. He also swore an oath angrily, saying, "Unless Judas and his troops are delivered into my hands now, then if I come back to..." He also swore an oath angrily, saying, "Unless Judas and his troops are delivered into my hands now, then if I come back in peace, I will set this house on fire." Then he stormed out in great rage. The priests then entered and stood facing the altar and the sanctuary. They wept and cried out, "You chose this place to be called by your name, that it might be a house of prayer and supplication for your people. Take vengeance on this man and on his soldiers, and let them die by the sword. Remember their blasphemies, and let them be alive no longer." Soon Nicanor left Jerusalem and camped at Beth-horon, and the army of Syria joined him. But Judas took position in Adasa with 3,000 troops. Judas prayed, saying, "When the ambassadors from the king uttered blasphemy, your angel went forth and struck 185,000 of the Assyrians. Crush also this army before us today, and let the others know that he spoke blasphemy against your sanctuary, and judge him according to his malice." So the armies faced off in war the 13th day of the month of Adar, and Nicanor's army was scattered. He himself was the first to fall in the war. When his soldiers saw Nicanor die, they dropped their weapons and ran. Israel even chased them a day's journey from Adassa as far as Gazara. As they pursued them, they kept blowing the trumpets, sounding the battle call. Then the Israelites went out from all the villages around Judea and outflanked the adversaries. They drove them back to the pursuing army, and they all fell by the sword. Not one of them survived. Then Israel captured the spoils and their possessions. They even beheaded Nicanor and severed his right hand, which he had stretched out arrogantly. They carried them and put them on display just outside Jerusalem. So the people were very glad, and they celebrated that day as a day of great joy. A decree came forth to celebrate this day at the same time every year on the 13th day of Adar. Thus the land of Judah had peace for several days. Give me a second, just get some more water. Chapter 8. Then Judas learned of the reputation of the Romans, that they were mighty and behaved well toward all who made a pact with them. They could ensure friendship with as many as came to them, indeed, because they were of great strength. People also told him of their warfare and the courageous works they were doing in Gaul, how they conquered them and imposed taxes on them. They also reported what they had done in the country of Spain to take control of their silver and gold mines, and how they dominated the entire region by their careful planning and forbearance, although the area was a great distance away. The Romans also defeated kings who challenged them from around the world until they subdued them and struck a deadly blow against them. But the others paid them taxes each year. They battled and soundly conquered Philip and Perseus, kings of the Macedonians, and others who stood up against them in war. They further conquered Antiochus, the great king of Asia, who went to war against them with 120 elephants and cavalry and chariots and a massive army, but his troops were destroyed by them. They captured him alive and ordered that he and those who would rule in the future should pay large taxes along with hostages. They also took from him the countries of India, Media, and Lydia. Then they gave some of the best of all these territories to King Eumenes. The Greeks also plotted to come against them, but this became known to the Romans, and they sent one of their generals against them. He fought with them, and many wounded fell, and the Romans took their wives and children captive. They robbed them, took their land, pulled down their fortresses, and have to this day enslaved them. They crushed and captured the remaining kingdoms and the islands, as many as would oppose them. But they secured a relationship with their friends, and those people who relied on them. Thus they conquered rulers far away and nearby, as many as had heard of their reputation feared them. Those the Romans desire to help and to raise up as kings, they establish, and those kings they wish to depose, they depose, for they had great power. But despite all this, none of the Romans had donned a crown or vested in purple so as to be magnified by it. Instead, they formed a council for themselves, and 320 senators constantly deliberate concerning the people to help them behave in an orderly fashion. They trust one man to govern them for a year and to rule over their land. Everyone heeds this one leader, and there is no jealousy or strife among them. Now Judas appointed Eupolemus, the son of John, son of Achos, and Jason, the son of Eleazar, and dispatched them to Rome to build friendship and an alliance, and to free their people from a yoke of bondage, because they realized the Greek kingdom was subjecting Israel to total servitude. So they journeyed to Rome, a very long trip. When they came to the Senate chamber, they said the following: Judas, also called Maccabees, his brothers and the Jewish people, sent us here to you to build an alliance and have peace with you, that you may enlist us as your friends and allies. The proposal pleased the Senate, so this is the copy of the message they issued in reply, inscribed on bronze tablets and sent to Jerusalem, to be kept there as a record of peace and friendship. May it be well with the Roman people, and the Jewish nation shall respond wholeheartedly as their allies, as the occasion may dictate. If war comes first to Rome or to any of their allies in all the dominion, the Judean nation shall act as their allies, wholeheartedly, as the occasion may dictate to them. As to any enemy who wages war, the Jews shall not donate or supply grain, weapons, money, or ships, as Rome has stated, and they shall honor these commitments without getting anything in return. Similarly, should war break out first against the Jewish nation, the Romans shall freely respond as their allies, as is appropriate for them. Further, no grain, weapons, money, or ships will be given to allies of the enemy, as Rome has decided, and they shall hold to these obligations and do so with no deception. Thus the Romans offer a treaty with the Jews on these terms. If after these agreements take effect, both parties should decide to add or subtract anything, they shall do so by agreement, and whatever they add or subtract shall be binding. Now, regarding the evils of Demetrius, the king is doing to them, we have sent to him this word: if therefore they appeal to us against you again, we will defend their rights and oppose you, be it on the sea or on land. Now Demetrius got word that Nicanor and his men had fallen in battle, so he authorized Bacchides and Alcimus to go a second time into the land of Judah and take the right-hand flank of the army with them. Thus they travelled the highway into Gilgal and camped at Methaloth in Arbela. They captured it, and many people died. Then, in the first month of the 152nd year, they encamped opposite Jerusalem. But they departed there and went to Berea, 20,000 foot soldiers and 2,000 cavalry with them. Now Judas set up camp in Elasa, and 3,000 chosen men accompanied him. When they saw how large the number of the enemy forces was, they were very afraid, and many sneaked out of the camp. Just 800 men remained among them. When Judas realized his troops had run away and the battle was pressing upon him, he was greatly discouraged and had no time to rally them. Though weary, he said to those who remained, "Let us arise and move out against our enemies. We may yet be able to fight them." But they kept trying to turn him back, saying, "We are not able. Let us rather save our lives now. Let us return with our brothers and fight against them later, for we are too few." But Judas answered, "May it be far from us to do such a thing, to run away from them. If our time has come to die, then let us die courageously, for the sake of our people. we will not leave behind a charge against our honor." Then the forces of Bacchides moved out from the camp in formation and stood to encounter them. The mounted troops were divided into two parts, and the sling throwers and the archers advanced before the army, along with all the chief warriors. Bacchides was on the right flank. Then the phalanx drew near between the companies on both sides and sounded their trumpets. The army of Judas also blew its trumpets. The ground shook by the clamor of the troops, and the battle raged on from morning until nightfall. Judas realized that Bacchides had the strength of his forces on the right flank. So all the stout-hearted men came together with Judas. They demolished the right flank and pursued Bacchides' men all the way to Mount Azotus. When those on the left flank saw that the right flank was broken, they reversed course and followed closely behind the army of Judas. The battle was fierce, and many men on both sides suffered wounds and fell. Judas also fell, and his men fled. Jonathan and Simon took Judas their brother and buried him in the tomb of his fathers in Modian. They wept for him, and all Israel mourned him with great lamentation for many days, saying, "How the mighty is fallen, Israel's Saviour." Now the abundant acts of Judas, his wars, the brave things he did, and his greatness are not recorded, for there were far too many. After Judas's death, the lawless emerged in all the regions of Israel, and all those rose up who worked evil. In those days there was a great famine, and the nation deserted with the evildoers to Bacchides. He chose godless men and appointed them lords of the country. These men sought out and searched for the allies of Judas, bringing them to Bacchides. He took vengeance on them and mocked them. There was great perplexity in Israel, such as had not been seen since the days when the prophets ceased to be seen in their midst. Then all of Judas's friends came together and spoke to Jonathan. "Since your brother Judas died, a man like him has not come out to take on our enemies, namely Bacchides, and those from our country who hate us. Therefore, we have now chosen you this day to replace him as our ruler and be our leader in battle." So Jonathan accepted the command at once and rose up in place of Judas his brother. When Bacchides heard this, he sought to kill him, but Jonathan, Simon his brother, and everyone with him knew of this, and they escaped to the desert of Tekoa, and camped near the waters of the pool of Asphar. Bacchides discovered this on the Sabbath, and he and his army all crossed over the Jordan. So Jonathan sent John, his brother, as leader of the people, and he begged his Nabatean friends for approval to store their huge amounts of baggage with them. But the sons of Jambri from Medeba came out and seized John and left with everything he had. After these things happened, they told Jonathan and his brother Simon, saying, "The sons of Jambri are holding a great marriage feast, and they are bringing the bride from Nadabath, a daughter of one of the great noblemen of Canaan, with a huge envoy." They remembered the blood of John, their brother, and went up and hid under the cover of the mountain. They raised their eyes and looked, and behold, there was a noisy crowd coming with much baggage. The bridegroom also came forth with his friends and brothers to meet them, with tambourines, the musicians, and many weapons. Jonathan's men rose up against against them from an ambush and killed them. Many of the wounded also fell, and the rest fled to the mountain. So they took all their spoils. The wedding was changed to mourning, and the sound of the musicians became like a dirge. Thus they avenged their brother's blood and returned to the low ground of the Jordan. Bacchides then heard of this and arrived with a large army on the Sabbath at the banks of the Jordan. So Jonathan said to those with him, "Let us stand and fight for our lives, for today is not as yesterday or the day before. Behold, the battle is before us and behind us. The water of the Jordan is on this side and that, and the low ground and thicket is not the place to turn aside. Now therefore, cry out to heaven, and you may be saved from the hand of our adversaries." So the battle was joined, and Jonathan reached out his hand to strike Bacchides, who ducked aside and went behind him. Then Jonathan and his forces jumped into the Jordan River, swimming to the other side. Bacchides and his army did not cross over the Jordan to strike them. About 1,000 of Bacchides' soldiers fell on that day. Bacchides then returned to Jerusalem and built fortified cities in Judea. The fortresses were in Jericho and in Emmaus, Beth-horon, Bethel, Timnath, Pharathon, and Tephon, all with high walls, gates, and bars. He also placed a guard in them, and they were hostile to Israel. Then he strengthened the cities of Beth-thor and Gazara and the citadel, and placed armies in them with stores of provisions. He also seized the sons of the rulers of the area, holding them hostage under armed guards at the citadel in Jerusalem. Then in the 153rd year, in the 2nd month, Alchemists issued the command to take down the wall of the inner court of the sanctuary. Then he took down the work of the prophets and started to destroy it. At that instant, Alchemists was stricken, his mischief was thwarted, his mouth was shut up, and he became paralyzed. He could not even speak a word so as to give orders concerning his property. So Alchemists died then and there in great pain. When Bacchides saw that Alchemists had died, he returned to King Demetrius. Thus the land of Judah was peaceful for 2 years. Soon all the lawless men deliberated among themselves, saying, "Behold, Jonathan and those with him are living in peace and certitude. Now therefore, let us bring Bacchides back here, and he will seize them all in one night." So they went and conversed with him, and he departed to come with a large army, secretly sending letters to all his allies in Judea, telling them to capture Jonathan and those with him. But they could not do so, because their plot had been discovered. So Jonathan and his men caught about 50 of their countrymen who were the leaders of the agitation, and killed them. Then Jonathan, Simon, and those with them departed for Beth-bassi in the desert, and rebuilt the outpost that had been destroyed and strengthened it. When Bacchides heard of this, he gathered all his army and sent orders to the men of Judea. Then he arrived and camped at Beth-bassi and attacked it for many days, making engines of war. But Jonathan left Simon his brother in the city and headed out onto the country with a handful of men. He struck Odemirah and his brothers and the sons of Phasiron inside their tents. Then he launched his attack and entered into battle with his armies. Meanwhile, Simon and those with him came out of the city and set on fire the engines of war. Once they took the offensive against Bacchides, he was crushed by them. They upset him greatly because his plan of attack was in vain. Also, he was filled with rage at his advisors, the lawless men who urged him to come into the country. So he killed many of them, and they decided to return home. When Jonathan learned of these events, he sent envoys to make peace with Maccabees and to obtain freedom for the captives. Maccabees accepted the proposal and swore to Jonathan he would not harm him all the days of his life. He returned to him the hostages taken earlier from the land of Judah. Then he returned to his homeland and made no further attempt to come into their country. Thus the sword was laid down in Israel. Then Jonathan settled in Michmash, where he began to judge the people and to destroy the ungodly men of Israel. Just going to get another swig of water. So, chapter 10. Then in the 160th year, Alexander, the son of Antiochus Epiphanes, went forth and conquered Ptolemais. They made him welcome, and he reigned there. But when Demetrius the king learned this, he gathered a huge army and went out to battle him. Demetrius also sent a letter to Jonathan with peaceful words to flatter him. For he said, "Let us act with foresight to make peace with him before he sides with Alexander against us. For he will recall the evils we carried out against him, and against his brothers and his nation." So the king gave authority to Jonathan to assemble an army, prepare weapons, and be his ally. He also ordered the hostages in the citadel to be released to him. Then Jonathan entered Jerusalem and read the letter in the presence of all the people and those in the citadel. They were very frightened when they heard the king had given Jonathan authorization to assemble an army. So the men in the citadel returned the hostages to Jonathan, and he brought them back to their parents. Soon Jonathan settled in Jerusalem and began to reconstruct the city. He also told the workers to build the walls to surround Mount Zion with square-cut stones for fortification, which they did. Then the foreigners who had been in their fortresses built by Maccabees fled. Each one left his place and departed into his own land. Only some in Beth-Azor who had forsaken the law and the commandments remained, for it was a place of refuge. When King Alexander heard about the proposals Demetrius had sent to Jonathan, and was told about the battles and the courageous deeds done by Jonathan and his brothers, as well as what they had suffered, he said, "Where will we find another man like this? Let us make him our friend and our ally." So he wrote a letter and sent it to him, saying, "Alexander, the king, to Jonathan, his brother, greetings. We have heard you are a mighty warrior and suitable to be our ally. So now we appoint you today as high priest of your people and command that you be called a friend of the king." He also sent him a purple robe and a golden crown. "We ask you to agree with our interests and maintain friendship with us." So Jonathan, in the 7th month of the 160th year, put on the holy robe at the Feast of Tabernacles. Then he gathered an army and stockpiled many weapons. When Demetrius heard these reports, he was disturbed and said, "What is this that we have done? Alexander has upstaged us by forming a friendship with the Jews for support. I also will write them words of encouragement and promise them glory and gifts, that they may be my support." So he sent them the following message: "King Demetrius, to the nation of the Jews, greetings. Since you have kept your agreements with us and maintained our friendship, and have not sided with our enemies. We have learned of this and rejoice. Even now do we continue to keep faith. Even now do continue to keep faith with us, and we will repay you good things for your deeds. We will grant you many prerogatives and give you gifts. At this time, I am releasing and exempting all Jews from tribute and salt taxes and from crown levies. Furthermore, instead of handing over to me a third of the harvest and half of the fruit of the trees which I am due, I cancel them from this day forward and beyond. I will not extract them from those of Judah, nor from the 3 provinces annexed to them, from Samaria and Galilee from now on. In addition, let Jerusalem and her vicinities be set apart and released from tithes and taxes. I am also releasing my control of the citadel in Jerusalem, and I give it to the high priest, that he may place men in it, whom he himself chooses to guard it. So every soul of the Jews taken captive from the land of Judah into all my kingdom, I release freely without payment. Let all officials also cancel the duties on their livestock. Moreover, all the feasts, the Sabbaths, the new moons, the appointed days, as well as the 3 days prior to the feast and 3 days after the feast, let all these days be established as exempt and released for the Jews in my kingdom. No one will have the power to exact anything from them or to trouble any of them about anything. Let the number of Jews in the army of the king be limited to 30,000 men, and let the stipend that is due to all the troops of the king be paid to them. Some of them are to be established in the great fortresses of the king, and some are to be set in positions of trust, wherever the kingdom has need. Let their officers and leaders be taken from them, and let them live by their own laws, as the king commanded in the land of Judah. As for the 3 provinces added to Judea from the country of Samaria, let them be considered as one, so it may not be subject to any other authority than the high priest. I have given Ptolemais and the land adjoining it as gifts to the sanctuary in Jerusalem, for regular expenses in the sanctuary. I also grant 15,000 silver shekels yearly out of the king's revenue from the appropriate places. Even all the surplus the officials did not pay us as in the first years. From now on, they will give for the works of the temple. Moreover, the 5,000 shekels of silver which the officials received every year from the incomes of the sanctuary, these are also cancelled, because they belong to the priests who minister there. Further, whoever takes refuge at the temple in Jerusalem or in any of its vicinities, because he owes a royal payment or any debt, let him be released and receive back all his property in my kingdom. The expense of rebuilding and restoring the structures of the sanctuary is also to be paid from the king's revenue. Then too, the expenses of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and the fortifications around it are to be paid from the king's revenue, and also the rebuilding of the walls in Judea. But when Jonathan and the people heard these words, they did not believe or accept them, because they remembered the great wrongs Demetrius had done in Israel, and how badly he had afflicted them. So they favored Alexander, because he was the first to offer peaceable words to them. Therefore they remained allied with him all his days. Now King Alexander assembled a large army and took position opposite Demetrius. The 2 kings met in battle, and the army of Demetrius fled. Alexander took pursuit and defeated them. He fought very hard until sunset, and Demetrius fell that day. Okay, continuing. Then Alexander sent envoys to Ptolemy, the king of Egypt, with the following message. Since I returned to my kingdom and have taken the throne of my fathers and established my rule, for I defeated Demetrius and secured control of my country, I faced him in war, and he and his forces were destroyed by us, and we indeed have sat down upon the throne of his kingdom. Now let us build a friendship with each other. Give me your daughter in marriage, and I will become your son-in-law. I will give you gifts worthy of both you and her. Then Ptolemy the king answered, saying, It was a good day when you went back to your father's homeland and occupied the throne of their kingdom. Now I will do for you what you requested. So meet me in Ptolemais, that we might see each other, and I will be your father-in-law, as you asked. Then Ptolemy left Egypt along with his daughter Cleopatra, and reached Ptolemais in the 162nd year. King Alexander met him there, and Ptolemy gave him his daughter. King Alexander met him there, and Ptolemy gave him his daughter Cleopatra in marriage. He celebrated her wedding in Ptolemy with great pageantry in royal manner. Then King Alexander wrote for Jonathan to meet him. So he journeyed with splendor to Ptolemais, and there met the two monarchs. He offered them silver and gold, and gave their friends numerous gifts. Thus he found favor with them. Then some troublemakers from Israel, lawless men, also gathered against Jonathan to accuse him, but the king paid no attention to them. The king then gave command to remove Jonathan's clothes and robe him in purple, and they did. Then the king seated him with himself and said to his leaders, Go out with him into the midst of the city and proclaim that no one should accuse him concerning any matter, and let no one trouble him for any cause. So it was that when his accusers saw the honor given him according to the proclamation, and saw him robed in purple, they fled. Thus the king honored him and inscribed him among his close friends. He also appointed him general and provincial governor. Then Judas departed to Jerusalem with peace and gladness of heart. Now in the 165th year, Demetrius the son of Demetrius travelled from Crete to the land of his fathers. When King Alexander heard it, he was very distressed and went back to Antioch. Then Demetrius appointed Apollonius governor of Coel, Syria. Apollonius gathered a large army and marched against Jamnia. He sent word to Jonathan the high priest, saying, You alone rose up against us, but I was ridiculed and disgraced because of you. Why do you maintain authority over us in the hill country? Now, therefore, if you trust in your army, come down against us in the plain, and let us judge together for ourselves there, for I have an army of the cities. Inquire and learn who I am, and the others who help us. They tell us there is no place for your foot to stand before us, because your fathers were put to flight twice in their land. Even now you shall not be able to withstand such a cavalry and army in the plain, where there is neither stone nor pebble, nor any place to flee. But when Jonathan heard the words of Apollonius, he was moved to action. He chose 10,000 men and departed from Jerusalem, and his brother Simon joined to help him. He took up a position at Joppa, but the men of that city shut its gates, for Apollonius had a band of soldiers in Joppa. So Jonathan attacked them. Then the men of Joppa became fearful and opened the gates, and Jonathan captured Joppa. When Apollonius got word of it, he gathered 3,000 cavalry and a sizable army and marched into Azotus, as though he were going beyond. But he went ahead into the plain, since he had a large cavalry and trusted in it. Jonathan chased him to Azotus, and there the armies joined in battle. But Apollonius secretly had left 1,000 cavalry behind. Jonathan discovered there was an ambush behind him, for they encircled his army and shot arrows at his troops from morning until sundown. But his army stood their ground as Jonathan had ordered, and their cavalry grew tired. Then Simon brought in his army and confronted the phalanx in battle, for the cavalry had grown tired, and they were crushed by him and fled. When the cavalry were scattered on the plain, they retreated to Azotus, entering Beth Dagon, their pagan temple, to hide. Then Jonathan set Azotus and the surrounding cities on fire, and took spoils from them. The temple of Dagon and those who took refuge in it were burned up in the fire. So 8,000 men fell by the sword, along with those who were killed by the fire. Then Jonathan left there and camped opposite Ashkelon, and the men of the city came out with great ceremony to meet him. Jonathan and the men with him later went back to Jerusalem with many spoils. Thus, when King Alexander heard these reports, he proceeded to honor Jonathan again. So he sent him a golden buckle, as was customary to give to the relatives of kings. He also gave to him Ekron and all its regions as his possession. You're right, Joe Skill. Christ is definitely risen. Risen indeed. All right, chapter 11. This is a long book. Then the king of Egypt gathered together a large army, like sand along the seashore, and many ships. And he sought to obtain possession of Alexander's kingdom by deceit, and to add it to his kingdom. So he set out for Syria with words of peace, and those with the cities were open to him, and met with him, because King Alexander ordered them to meet him, since he was his father-in-law. But when Ptolemy entered the cities, he set a band of soldiers in every city. But when they neared Azotus, they showed him the temple of Dagon, which had been burned, and Azotus and the surrounding fortifications that were destroyed, and the bodies of those lying about But when they neared Azotus, they showed him the temple of Dagon, which had been burned, and Azotus and the surrounding fortifications that were destroyed, and the bodies of those lying about whom Jonathan had burned in the war, for they made heaps of them in his path. They also told the king what Jonathan had done, so as to blame him, but the king remained silent. Jonathan then met the king in Joppa with great ceremony, and they greeted each other and stayed the night there. Jonathan journeyed with the king to the river Eleutherus, and then went back to Jerusalem. Thus King Ptolemy ruled over the coastal cities as far as Seleucia by the sea, and devised evil plans against Alexander. So he sent ambassadors to King Demetrius, saying, "Come, let us enter into a covenant with one another. I will give you my daughter, Alexander's wife, in marriage, and you will reign over your father's kingdom. For I regret giving my daughter, since he tried to kill me." Thus Ptolemy blamed Alexander because he desired his kingdom. So he took back his daughter and gave her to Demetrius. Therefore, he was estranged from Alexander, and their animosity was evident. Yeah, it's great to hear you've been reading these books too, Joe. Definitely very insightful. Then Ptolemy entered Antioch Then Ptolemy entered Antioch and assumed the crown of Asia. So he wore 2 crowns on his head, that of Egypt and that of Asia. But King Alexander was in Cilicia at this time, for the inhabitants there were in revolt. When Alexander heard of it, he engaged him in battle. So Ptolemy went out with a mighty force and faced him, putting him to flight. Then Alexander took refuge in Arabia, seeking safety. King Ptolemy was held in great honor. So Zabdiel, the Arab, cut off Alexander's head and sent it to Ptolemy. But King Ptolemy died 3 days later, and his garrisons in the fortresses were destroyed by the inhabitants of those fortresses. Thus in the 167th year, Demetrius became king. In those days, Jonathan gathered men from Judea to attack the citadel in Jerusalem, and he built many engines of war for use against it. But some lawless men who despised their nation came to the king and told him Jonathan would set siege against the citadel. When the king heard this, he was enraged, and he broke camp and went to Ptolemy's. He wrote Jonathan that he was to lift the siege and to meet him in the Ptolemy's at once for a conference. But when Jonathan heard this, he issued orders to continue the siege. Then he chose some elders of Israel and some priests and put himself in danger, for he took silver, gold, clothing, and many other friendly gifts and went to the king in Ptolemy's. And Jonathan found favor with him. Again, some lawless men from the nation accused Jonathan, but the king did to him as those before him had done, and exalted him in front of all his friends. He also confirmed him in the high priesthood, and whatever other honors he held before, and considered him as one of his best friends. Then Jonathan asked the king to exempt Judea from taxes, along with the 3 provinces and Samaria, and promised him 300 talents. The king was pleased and wrote Jonathan a letter concerning all these things. Its message was as follows: King Demetrius to his brother Jonathan and the nation of the Jews, greetings. The copy of this letter, which we wrote to Athanasius, our relative, concerning you, we have copied also to you, that you might know what it says. King Demetrius to his father Athanasius, greetings. To the nations of the Jews, our friends, and who do what is right towards us, we have decided to do good because of their goodwill towards us. We have established the borders of Judea for them, and the 3 provinces of Apharima, Lydda, and Rathaman. They were added to Judea from Samaria, as well as all the areas bordering them. All who offer sacrifices in Jerusalem we have released from the royal taxes which the king received from them each year, from the harvest of the earth and fruit of the trees. Any other payments due us from now on, from the tithes, the salt pits, and the crown taxes, from all these we grant release. None of these provisions will be cancelled from now on for all time. Now, therefore, take heed to make a copy of this, and let it be given to Jonathan, and put it in a notable place on the holy mountain. When King Demetrius saw the land was peaceful before him, and no one was opposed to him, he dismissed his troops, each to their own place, except the foreign soldiers whom he had recruited as mercenaries from the islands of the nations. So all the soldiers who had served his fathers hated him. Now Trypho formerly had been one of Alexander's supporters. He saw that all the soldiers complained against Demetrius. So he approached Imalkue, the Arab, who was rearing Antiochus, the young son of Alexander. He insisted that he hand Antiochus over to him, so as to make him king in place of his father. He told Imalkue everything Demetrius had done, and the hatred his troops had for him, and he remained there many days. Meanwhile, Jonathan sent to King Demetrius the request that he remove the soldiers in the citadel from Jerusalem, as well as those in the fortresses, for they were at war with Israel. Then Demetrius sent to Jonathan, saying, "Not only will I do these things for you and your nation, but I will greatly honor you and the Jewish nation when I have the opportunity. And you will do rightly to send me soldiers who will ally with me, because all my troops have revolted." So Jonathan sent 3,000 very able men to him at Antioch. When they came to the king, he was very glad at their arrival. Then men from the city gathered within the city, 120,000 of them, and they wanted to kill the king. But the king fled into the palace, and those from the city seized the streets of the city, and they began to fight. So the king summoned the Jews for help, and they all rallied around him and dispersed throughout the city. On that day they killed 100,000 men. They set the city on fire, took many spoils on that day, and rescued the king. When the men of the city realized the Jews had gained control of the city at will, they lost their courage and called out to the king with this request: "Restore the peace and make the Jews quit fighting us and the city." So they threw down their weapons and made peace. Then the Jews were honored before the king and before all those in his kingdom. After this, they returned to Jerusalem with many spoils. Thus King Demetrius ruled on the throne of his kingdom, and the land was peaceful before him. But he broke his word about everything he promised Jonathan. Thus he became estranged from him, and did not repay Jonathan the favors he had done for him, but greatly afflicted him. It's good to have you, Rigovich. And yeah, thanks for the support. Later, Trypho returned and had with him the young boy Antiochus, who put on the crown and became king. All the troops who had cursed Demetrius gathered around him. They fought against Demetrius, who was put to flight. Trypho then captured the elephants and gained control of Antioch. So Antiochus, the younger, wrote to Jonathan, saying, "I confirm you in the high priesthood, set you over the 4 provinces, and you will be one of the king's friends." He also sent him gold cups to serve him at table, and gave him authority to drink from these, to dress in purple, and to wear a golden buckle. He then established Simon, his brother, as general from the ladder of Tyre to the boundary of Egypt. Then Jonathan departed and journeyed beyond the river and in the cities. The entire army of Syria gathered around him as allies. When he went into Ascalon, the people of the city met him and honored him. From there he left for Gaza, for Gaza. But when the inhabitants of Gaza shut him out, he besieged the city, set its surrounding fortifications on fire, and plundered them. Thus the men of Gaza pleaded with Jonathan. He made peace with them, took the sons of their governors as hostages, and dispatched them to Jerusalem. Then he traveled through the country, going as far as Damascus. Jonathan also got word the officers of Demetrius had arrived in Kadesh in Galilee with a sizable army. They intended to oust him from office. So he set out to meet them, but he left his brother Simon in the country. Then Simon positioned himself at Beth-zur, and for many days fought against it and blocked it off. Then the people begged him for peace, and he granted it to them. So he cast them out from there, took possession of the city, and placed a garrison in it. Now Jonathan and his soldiers camped by the lake of Gennesaret, and rose early the next morning, and marched to the plain of Hazor. Then behold, the foreign army met him in the plain, and set up an ambush against him in the mountains. But they themselves met him face to face. Then the men in the ambush rose up from their places and joined the battle. All Jonathan's men fled. None of them remained except Mattathias, the son of Absalom, and Judas, the son of Calphi, commanders of the armed forces. So Jonathan tore his garments, poured earth on his head, and prayed. Then he turned back to the battle and put the enemy to flight. When Jonathan's men who had run away saw this, they returned and joined him in the pursuit of the enemy as far as Kadesh, and there they set up camp. As many as 3,000 of the foreign army fell that day. Then Jonathan went back to Jerusalem. Give me another sec. I think it's 4 more chapters. Let's go. So chapter 12. When Jonathan saw the time was right, he chose envoys, and sent them to Rome to validate and renew friendship with them. Also, he sent letters to Sparta and other localities for the same reasons. So they left for Rome, entered the Senate chamber, and said, Jonathan, the high priest, and the nation of the Jews sent us here to renew the former friendship and alliance between ourselves. Then the Romans wrote letters to the citizens in every place, so they might send forth the ambassadors to the land of Judah in peace. This is the copy of the letters in which Jonathan wrote to the Spartans. Jonathan the high priest, the elders of the nation, the priests and the Jewish people to their brothers the Spartans. Greetings. Sometime earlier, letters were sent to Onias, the high priest, by Arius, who ruled over you, that you are our brothers, as the attached copy indicates. Onias received the envoy with honor, and he accepted the letters, which plainly showed the alliance and friendship. Therefore, although we do not need these things, since we have the holy books in our hands, we have decided to send and renew our brotherhood and friendship, so we would not be estranged from you. For significant time has elapsed since you sent word to us. Therefore, at every opportunity, both on feast days and ordinary days, we remember you unceasingly in the sacrifices we offer and in our prayers, as it is right and proper to remember, brothers. For we rejoice in your glory. But many troubles and many wars have surrounded us, and the kings around us have fought against us. We did not wish to trouble you and our other allies and friends with these wars, for we have had help from heaven assisting us. For we were freed from our enemies, and they were humbled. Therefore, we chose Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, and sent them to Rome to renew our former friendship and alliance with them. We also ordered them to go to you, to greet you, and give you these letters from us concerning the renewal of our brotherhood. Now then, please send us a reply. This is the copy of the letters they sent to Onias. King Arius of the Spartans, to Onias, the high priest, greetings. It has been put in writing regarding both the Spartans and the Jews that they are brothers, and are both of the family of Abraham. So now that we know this, please write us concerning your welfare. Thus we are writing to you that your cattle and possessions are ours, and ours are yours. Therefore, we order our ambassadors to report to you accordingly. Then Jonathan heard the officers of Demetrius had come back with a larger army than before to make war against him. So he marched out of Jerusalem and engaged them in the area around Hamath, giving them no chance to invade his country. So he sent out spies to their encampment. They later returned and told him the army of Demetrius planned to attack the Jews at night. At sunset, Jonathan ordered those with him to stay awake and to be ready with their weapons for a fight during the night. Then he sent out an advance guard to surround the camp. When the enemy got word that Jonathan and his soldiers were ready for battle, they were terrified at heart. So they lit fires in their camp and fled. But Jonathan and his men did not know this until it was morning, for they saw the firelight. So Jonathan chased after them, but could not overtake them, because they crossed over the Eleuthurus river. Then Jonathan turned aside against the Arabs, called Zabadeans, and struck them, and took their spoils. He then broke camp and marched to Damascus, and throughout all that country. Meanwhile, Simon went out and marched as far as Ascalon and the fortresses nearby, and turned aside to Joppa and captured it. For he heard they wished to hand over the fortress to the men sent by Demetrius. So he established a garrison there to guard it. When Jonathan returned, he assembled the elders of the people. Together, they decided to build fortresses in Judea and to make the walls of Jerusalem even higher, and raise a great high wall between the citadel and the city, to separate it from the city, so it would be isolated, and its garrison could not buy nor sell goods. So they assembled to rebuild the city and part of the wall on the valley to the east that had fallen. Thus he repaired the wall that is called Chaphanetha. Simon also built Adida in the Shephelah. They fortified it and set up bolted gates. Then Trypho sought to rule Asia, to wear the crown, and to stretch forth his hand against King Antiochus. He also took precautions, lest Jonathan would not permit it, but wage war against him. So seeking to capture and destroy him, he marched forth to Bethshan. Then Jonathan went out to meet him with 40,000 soldiers, chosen for battle, and he came to Bethshan. When Trypho saw that he came with a large army, he was afraid to stretch forth his hand against him. So he received him honorably and met him with all his friends. He gave gifts to Jonathan and ordered his friends and his own troops to obey him as himself. Then he said to Jonathan, "Why have you troubled all these men? We are not at war. Now send them home, but choose a few soldiers for yourself to be with you. Then come with me to Ptolemais, and I will give it over to you along with the rest of the fortresses and the remaining troops and officers. Then I will turn around and go home, for that is why I came here. That is why I came here. So Jonathan believed Trypho and did as he had said, and sent away the troops who departed for the region of Judah. But he kept 3,000 soldiers with him, 2,000 of which he left in Galilee, and 1,000 who went with him. But when Jonathan entered Ptolemais, the men of the city shut the gates and captured him. And they slew with the sword all who entered with him. Then Trypho sent soldiers and cavalry into Galilee and the Great Plain to kill all Jonathan's men. But when the soldiers learned that Jonathan and those with him had been captured and killed, they encouraged each other to keep marching in close formation, ready for attack. But when the pursuers saw them ready to fight for their lives, they retreated. So they all came safely to the land of Judah and cried out for Jonathan and his men. They were exceedingly afraid, and all Israel mourned greatly. Then all the nations surrounding them tried to defeat them, saying, There is none to lead them or to help them. Now then, let us wage war against them and erase them from memory. Sparta. I can't be the only one who thinks of Gladiator when they see the word Sparta. I'm not going to act it out though. Chapter 13. Now Simon learned that Trypho had assembled a huge army to march on the land of Judah and crush it. He saw the people were trembling with fear, so he went to Jerusalem and gathered everyone together. He encouraged them, saying, You know what my brothers and I and my father's house have done concerning the laws and the sanctuary. You know too the wars and the crises we have seen. This is why all my brothers perished, all for the sake of Israel, and only I am left. Now may my life never be safeguarded in time of trouble, for I am in no way better than my brothers. Thus I will avenge my nation and this sanctuary and your wives and children, for all the nations have hatefully gathered to destroy us. Thus he rekindled the spirit of the people when they heard these voices. Thus he rekindled the spirits of the people when they heard these words. They responded with a loud voice, saying, You lead us in place of Judas and your brother. Fight our wars, and we will do everything you tell us. So he gathered all the men of fighting age and rushed to finish the walls of Jerusalem. He fortified the city on all sides. Then he sent Jonathan, son of Absalom, with a sizable army to Joppa, and he drove out its people and remained there. Oh yeah, Joe, I think you're right. It's 300 I was thinking of actually. This is Sparta! That, yeah. I said I wouldn't act it out, but yeah. Verse 12. Meanwhile, Trypho left from Ptolemais with a large force to come into the land of Judah. Jonathan accompanied him under guard. Now Simon set up camp in Adida, opposite the plain. When Trypho heard that Simon had risen up in place of his brother Jonathan and was about to face him in battle, he sent men to him, saying, We are detaining your brother Jonathan because of the silver he owed the royal treasury and for which he is responsible. Now send 100 talents of silver and 2 of his sons as hostages, that when he is freed, he will not rise up against us. Then we will free him. Simon sensed they were speaking to him deceitfully, but he sent for the silver and the sons, lest he arouse great hostility among the people. For they might say, because Simon did not give him the money and the sons, Jonathan perished. Then he sent the sons and the 100 talents. But Trypho acted with deceit and would not free Jonathan. Later, Trypho arrived to invade Judah to destroy it, and they circled around the road leading to Adora. But Simon and his army advanced along opposite him every place he went. Then men from the citadel sent ambassadors to Trypho, urging him to come to them through the desert and send food for them. Trypho then prepared all his cavalry to come, but there was a heavy snowfall that night, and he could not march through the deep snow. Instead, he imparted and went into Gilead. But when he came near Basgama, he slew Jonathan and buried him there. Then Trypho turned and went to his own country. Simon sent men and gathered the remains of his brother Jonathan and buried him in Modane, the city of his fathers. All Israel mourned him with great lament for many days. Simon also built up the tomb of his father and brothers with polished stone in front and back, making it high enough to be seen. He then built 7 pyramids, one opposite the other, for his father and his mother and his 4 brothers. Around these pyramids, he made engines of war, building massive pillars around them, and upon these pillars he placed suits of armor for a perpetual memorial, and alongside the suits of armor he made carved ships, so they could be seen by everyone sailing the sea. This tomb, which he made in Modane, exists until this day. Now, Trypho also dealt wickedly with young Antiochus the king and murdered him. Then he became king in his place and wore the crown of Asia, bringing great adversity to the land. Simon thus strengthened the fortresses in Judea, surrounding them with high towers and with thick walls and gates and bolts, storing provisions in the fortresses. Also, Simon selected men and sent them to King Demetrius to bring relief for the country for all Trypho's actions were. Simon selected men and sent them to King Demetrius to bring relief for the country, for all Trypho's actions were violent. Then the king sent him a positive answer and wrote him this letter. King Demetrius to Simon the high priest, friend of kings, and to the elders and the Jewish nation, greetings. We received the crown of gold and the palm branch you sent. We are ready to declare general peace with you and to order our officials to cancel your taxes. Indeed, all the grants we made to you stay intact, and let the fortresses you built remain in your keeping. We also forgive the mistakes committed up to the present day as well, and remove the crown tax you owe. If any other tax has been exacted in Jerusalem, let it no longer be exacted. If some of your men are suited for enrollment in our bodyguard, let them be enrolled, and may there be peace among us. The yoke of the Gentiles was lifted from Israel in the 170th year. Then the people began to record in their letters and contracts, in the first year of Simon, the great high priest and commander and ruler of the Jews. In those days, Simon camped at Gazara, surrounding it with soldiers. He also built an engine of war, brought it to the city, and struck and seized one tower. Then the men in the siege Then the men in the siege engine jumped out and ran into the city, and there was a great commotion in Gazara. The men in the city also climbed up onto the walls with their wives and children, tearing their clothes and crying with a loud voice, pleading with Simon to make peace with them. They said, "Treat us not according to our evil deeds, but according to your mercy." So Simon made an agreement with them and ceased waging war against them. But he cast them out of the city and purified the houses that contained idols. Thus he entered Gazara with hymns and blessings. He also cast out all uncleanness from it and settled men there who would keep the law. Then he fortified it and built a dwelling there for himself. But the men in the citadel at Jerusalem were prevented from coming and going in the region to buy and to sell. So they were extremely hungry. Even the strong among them were dying of hunger. When they called out to Simon to be at peace with them, he did so, and then cast them out from there, purifying the citadel from its defilements. They entered it on the 23rd day of the second month of the 171st year, with praise and palm branches, and with lyres, with cymbals and stringed instruments, and with hymns and songs, because a great enemy had been defeated and cast out of Israel. Thus Simon ordered that each year they should commemorate this day with jubilation. When the Temple Mount was fortified along with the citadel, he himself and his men lived there. Then Simon noted that his son John had reached adulthood. So he appointed him commander of all the army, and he lived in Gazara. Need another drink. Hi Shay, good to have you. I know there's been so many taxes and tax removals. It's been... Whew. Anyway, chapter 14. Then in the 172nd year, King Demetrius gathered his troops and went into Media to enlist help for himself to wage war against Trypho. When Artaxerxes, king of Persia and Media, learned that Demetrius had entered his borders, he sent one of his officers to capture him alive. So he sent out and attacked the camp of Demetrius, and captured him, and brought him to Artaxerxes, who put him in prison. The land of Judah was peaceful all the days of Simon, and he sought the good of his nation, and his leadership and his glory pleased them all his days. Then in all his glory he took Joppa for a harbour, and made an entrance to the islands of the sea. He enlarged the nation's borders, and gained control of his country. He also gathered many captives, and ruled Gazara, Bethzor, and the citadel. When he removed from it the uncleanness, no one opposed him. They farmed their land in peace, and the land gave forth its produce, and the trees of the plain their fruit. Elders sat in the streets, talking together of good things. And the young men wore the glories and the apparel of war. He supplied the cities with food, and furnished them with weapons of defense, until his fame spread to the ends of the earth. He established peace in the land, and Israel rejoiced with great delight. Each one sat under his vine and fig tree, and no one made them afraid. He caused war to cease in the land, and kings were defeated in those days. He fortified all the humble among his people. He demanded adherence to the law, and removed all the lawless and evil men. He beautified the sanctuary, and multiplied the vessels of the sanctuary. When it was heard in Rome and as far away as Sparta that Jonathan had died, they were in great sorrow. But when they heard that his brother Simon had been made high priest in his place and was ruling over the land and the cities in it, they wrote to him on bronze plaques to renew the friendship and alliance they had built with him and with his brothers Judas and Jonathan. These tablets were read before all the people. These tablets were read before all the people gathered in Jerusalem. This is a copy of the letters of the Spartans. This is a copy of the letters the Spartans sent. The leaders and the city of the Spartans, to Simon the high priest, and the elders and the priests, and to all the Jewish people, our brothers, greetings. The ambassadors who were sent by you to our people told us about your glory and honor, and we were overjoyed at their coming. So we recorded what was said by them in our public decrees as follows. Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, the son of Jason, ambassador of the Jews, came to renew their friendship with us. Our citizens were pleased to receive them honorably and to place a copy of their words in the public archives so the people of the Spartans might have a record of them. They also sent a copy of this to Simon, the high priest. Later, Simon dispatched Numenius to Rome with a large gold shield that weighed 1,000 minas to verify the alliance with them. The people heard these words, and they said, "How can we show our gratitude to Simon and his sons? For he, his brothers, and his father's house stood strong and waged war with the enemies of Israel by themselves and secured her freedom." So they wrote these words on bronze tablets and put them on the pillars on Mount Zion, and this is a copy of what they wrote. On the 18th day of Elul, in the 172nd year, which is the 3rd year of the great high priest. On the 18th day of Elul, in the 172nd year, which is the 3rd year of the great high priest Simon, in the court of God's people, at the large gathering of the priests and people, and the rulers of the nation and the elders of the land, the following was made known to us. Since there have often been wars in the country, Simon the son of Matthias, priest of the sons of Jorib, with his brothers placed themselves at risk and opposed their nation's adversaries, so their sanctuary and the law would be protected, and they honored their nation with great glory. Jonathan also rallied their nation, was made their high priest, and was brought before his people. When their adversaries chose to invade their country and seize their sanctuary, Simon set out to wage war for his country. He spent large amounts of his own money and supplied weapons to the soldiers in his nation's army and paid them wages. Thus he strengthened the cities of Judea and Beth-Zor on the boundary of Judea, where the weapons of the enemy were kept. And he established there a garrison of Jews. He also strengthened Joppa by the sea and Gazara on the boundary of Azotus, where the enemy had previously lived. He moved the Jews there and supplied them with whatever they needed for their welfare. When the people saw Simon's dependability and the glory he was committed to bring to his nation, they chose him as their ruler and high priest, because he did all these things and because of the righteousness and good faith he kept towards his nation. In every way, he tried to honor his people. Under his rule, everything he touched prospered, and he drove out the Gentiles from the land. The men in the city of David in Jerusalem had made a citadel for themselves, from which they went out and defiled the vicinity of the sanctuary and caused great harm to its purity. Then he settled Jews in it and strengthened it for the security of the country and the city, and built up the walls of Jerusalem to greater heights. In light of these accomplishments, King Demetrius established him in the high priesthood. He also made him one of his friends and showed him great honor, for he heard the Jews were called friends, allies, and brothers by the Romans, and that they had received Simon's ambassadors with honor. Thus the Jews and the priests were pleased that Simon should be their ruler and high priest forever, until a faithful prophet should arise. They were also pleased that he should be their governor, and take responsibility for the sanctuary, and choose workers to meet its needs, and to look after the country, the weapons, and the fortresses. Indeed, they decided he should look after the sanctuary and be obeyed by all, that all the contracts of the nation should be drafted with his signature, and that he should be vested in purple and gold. None of the people or the priests were to be allowed to repeal any of these things, or say anything in opposition to him, or hold an assembly of the people without him, or be clothed in purple, or wear a gold buckle. Anyone who should do anything contrary to these decisions or nullify any of them was to be held liable. All the people resolved that Simon should act according to these decisions. So Simon consented, agreeing to become high priest and to be the governor and ethnarch of the Jews and priests and the guardian of all. They commanded that this decree be inscribed on bronze tablets and be put in a public place near the sanctuary. Copies were also placed in the treasury, accessible to Simon and his sons. Neurotoxin, I don't know if you're still there. Well, that was a bit loud. I don't know if you're still there. You're asking about a supposed contradiction or anachronism. I think you first need to start off with how you actually know what the canon is, because I can point out, I can go to a Muslim site or whatever site attacking the Christian faith, and I can show you a bunch of supposed contradictions, and yet you will make them congruent, and you will find a way to make them congruent, to make them agree without actually being a proper contradiction. And the reason you do that is because you presuppose what is scripture. So you first need to actually determine and decide how you actually know what scripture is. And that's your first question. Because I think once you do that, and once you look at history and see how the scriptures actually came to be bound together in a book, you'll see that there is no argument about Judith being scripture. So that's for you to do. You got homework. Anyway, chapter 15. Then Antiochus, son of King Demetrius, sent a letter from the islands of the sea to Simon, the high priest and ethnarch of the Jews, and to all the nation. It contained the following: Antiochus, the king to Simon, high priest and ethnarch, and the nation of the Jews, greetings. Since certain troublemakers gained the mastery over the kingdom of our fathers, I wish to lay claim to the kingdom so I can establish it as it was before. I have recruited a multitude of troops and prepared warships. I plan to go throughout the nation that I may pursue those who laid our country to ruin and desolated many of its cities. Now, therefore, I validate your tax remissions, which the kings before me forgave you, and whatever other payments they remitted for you. I also authorize you to make your own coinage as money for your nation, and allowed Jerusalem and the sanctuary to be free. All the weapons you prepared and the fortresses you built, which you seized, let them remain with you. Every money you owe the royal treasury, as well as future debts, let them be remitted from now on and for all time. As soon as we regain control of our kingdom, we will honor you and your nation and the temple with great glory, that your glory may be evident in all the earth. In the 174th year, King Antiochus went to the land of his fathers, and all his soldiers went with him. Few sided with Trypho. When Antiochus went after him, he fled to Dora by sea, for he knew that calamity had come upon him. His armies deserted him. Then Antiochus set up camp opposite Dora with 120,000 fighting men and 8,000 cavalry. He encircled the city, and the ships joined the battle from the sea. So he pressed hard against the city by land and sea, and did not allow anyone to leave or enter. Then Numenius and his men came from Rome with letters to the kings and their countries, in which the following was contained. Lucius, the Roman consul, to Ptolemy the king, greetings. Ambassadors of the Jews came to us as friends and allies, to renew their long-standing friendship and alliance. They were sent from Simon, the high priest, and by the Jewish people, and brought a gold shield of 1,000 minas. Therefore it pleased us to write the kings and their countries, that they not seek to hurt them or wage war against them, and their cities and country, or form alignments with those who fight them. It seems right to accept the shield from them. If therefore any troublemakers have escaped from their country to you, give them over to Simon the high priest, that he might prosecute them according to their law. The consul wrote identical letters to King Demetrius and to Attalus, Ariathes, and Arsaces, and to all the nations, to Sampsames and the Spartans, and to Delos, Mindos, Cien, Caria, Samos, Paphilia, Lycia, Halicarnassus, Rhodes, Phaselis, Cos, Side, Arados, Gotinia, Cnidos, Cyprus, and Cyrene. They also sent a copy to Simon the high priest. Meanwhile, King Antiochus besieged Dora a second time, repeatedly launching his forces against it and building engines of war. He put Trypho in confinement, so he can neither go out or go in. Then Simon sent Antiochus 2,000 chosen men as allies, along with silver, gold, and considerable weaponry. But Antiochus decided not to accept these things. He broke all the former agreements he had made with Simon, becoming estranged from him. Then he sent Athanasius, one of his friends, to confer with him, saying, "You control Joppa, Gazara, and the citadel in Jerusalem. They are cities of my kingdom. You desolated their territory and caused great damage in the land, and you rule over many places in my kingdom. Now, therefore, give back the cities you took and the taxes from the places you rule outside the boundaries of Judea. Otherwise, give me 500 talents of silver for them, as well as 500 talents more for the destruction you caused, and for the tribute of the cities, or else we will wage war and defeat you." When Athanasius, the friend of the king, entered Jerusalem and saw the glory of Simon and the sideboard plated with gold and silver, a magnificent display, he stood amazed. Then he reported the words of the king to him. Thus Simon answered and said to him, "We have not taken any foreign land, nor have we captured foreign property, but only the inheritance of our fathers, which years ago was seized unjustly by our adversaries. But now that we have occasion, we are holding firmly in the inheritance of our fathers. And as for Joppa and Gazara, which you want, their people were causing great damage to our people and our country. For them we give you 100 talents. Athanasius said not a word in reply, but returned to the king in anger. When he relayed to him these words, plus Simon's splendor and everything he witnessed, the king was extremely enraged. Now Trypho had boarded a ship and escaped to Orthosia. So the king made Sendebius his commander-in-chief of the seacoast, and gave him infantry, soldiers, and cavalry. He then ordered him to encamp opposite Judea, and further ordered him to build Kedron and strengthen its gates, and to wage war against the people. But the king himself pursued Trypho. When Sendebius arrived in Jamnia, he began to harass the people. He also invaded Judea, took people captive, and killed them. Thus he built up Kedron and stationed cavalry and soldiers there, so they could march through the roads of Judea, making roads as the king commanded him. Then John traveled from Gazara and told his father Simon the damage Sendebius was inflicting. So Simon called his two oldest sons, Judas and John, and said to them, "My brothers and I and my father's house have fought Israel's battles from our youth until this very day. Things have gone well for us, so as to rescue Israel many times over. Now I have become old, and you, by his mercy, are men of maturity. Take over my position and my brother's role, and go fight for our country, and may the help sent from heaven be yours." Thus, John chose 20,000 fighting men and cavalry from the country. Together, they marched towards Sendebius and encamped overnight in Modane. They arose early, marching to the plain. Behold, a huge army was marching out to meet them, infantry and cavalry, and there was a stream between them. John and his army faced off against them, and when he saw that his troops were afraid to ford the stream, he crossed first. His soldiers saw him and crossed behind him. He then divided up the men, putting the cavalry in the middle of the infantry, for the enemy's cavalry was very large. When they sounded the trumpet, Sendebius and his army were routed, and numbers of them fell wounded. The rest of them fled into the fortress. Then Judas, the brother of John, was wounded, but John pursued them until Sendebius reached Kedron, where he had done construction. When they ran into the towers in the fields of Azotus, John set them afire, and roughly 2,000 of their men perished. Then he returned to Judea in peace. Now Ptolemy, the son of Abibus, had been made governor to rule over the plain of Jericho. He had large hoards of silver and gold, for he was the son-in-law of the high priest. He was optimistic and full of determination to seize control of the country. So he developed an evil strategy to seize Simon and his sons by trickery. Now Simon was paying a visit to the cities throughout the country, concentrating on their needs. So he went down to Jericho, along with his sons Mattathias and Judas, in the 177th year, in the 11th month, the month of Shabbat. The son of Abibus received them with deceit in the little fortress called Dock, which he had erected, and and he gave them a grand feast and hid the men there. So when Simon and his sons became drunk, Ptolemy and his soldiers emerged and grabbed their weapons. When they encountered Simon in the banquet hall, they murdered him along with his 2 sons and certain of his servants. Indeed, Ptolemy committed great treachery, returning evil for good. Ptolemy then drafted a report to the king about these things, and asked that he might send him soldiers to help and to secure their country and cities. He also dispatched soldiers to Gazara to seize John, and sent letters to military tribunes to come to him, so he might give them silver, gold, and gifts. Then he sent others to capture Jerusalem and the Temple Hill. But somebody ran ahead and told John in Gazara that his father and his brothers had been killed, and that he has sent men to kill you as well. When John heard this, he was deeply shocked. He captured the soldiers who came to crush him and killed them, for he discovered they were there to kill him. The rest of John's words and his war history and brave acts, which he did so courageously, plus the heightening of the walls which he built, and the other accomplishments, behold, they are written in the book of his high priesthood, from when he was first made high priest, following his father. Wow. That is First Maccabees done. That is a long book. I did not expect it to be almost 3 hours. But yeah, praise God, we've read it through. I hope you all enjoyed that, and I hope that blessed you. Do like, comment, subscribe, all of it. And I will catch you in the next one. Like I said at the beginning, I'm currently working on the second video with regards to the history of the church. And that is proving to be a very, very in-depth video. I need to figure out how I'm going to do it. But I pray that that will bless you too as well when it comes. And it is coming, if the Lord wills. So until next time, glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Really good being here with you guys. Much love and God bless. I'll speak to you in the next one. Peace. Take care, guys.